The National Desk, America's News, now.
Thousands of cities and towns, we're seeing a great comeback story. Nearly 15 million new jobs created so far. That's a record. Growth is strong, wages are rising, inflation is down.
President Biden taking his message on the road with a new budget proposal in hand. The uphill battle for the president's priorities lay in the final year of his term.
I very clearly said I spoke to a woman who told me about when she was trafficked when she was 12.
The rebuttal battle as Senator Katie Britt goes on the defensive over a story she shared in last week's State of the Union response tonight. Why the woman at the center of that story is putting her on blast. And as a pivotal holiday begins in Gaza, no end of war in sight. What's next in the battle and what it means for the relationship between Israel and the U.S., its closest ally. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. We do begin with breaking news tonight. A tragedy in Illinois. 5 people, including 3 children, dead after a fiery crash when a school bus hit a semi-truck earlier today.
The bus was traveling west on Route 24 and for an unknown reason crossed over into the eastbound lanes in front of the semi-truck. Both vehicles became engulfed in flames.
We are still working to learn a lot more information. We do know there are no survivors of this crash. The deceased include the school bus driver, the 3 students on board, and the driver of the semi-truck. The investigation into what may have happened is now underway, and we'll be following developments on this story throughout the night. So stay with us for later editions of the National Desk as we continue to get the developments. We will bring them to you. President Joe Biden released his proposed annual budget today, following up on a State of the Union speech Thursday night that Republicans called overly partisan. President Biden doubling down on his economic vision for the country with new taxes for the wealthy and more money for social programs. According to the White House, if enacted, there will also be enough new taxes to bring the national debt down by $3 trillion over the next decade and still be able to offer universal pre-kindergarten education, provide 12 weeks of paid family leave, and create a new tax break for first-time home buyers. Biden says it's on the wealthy to, quote, pay their fair share on these investments.
Folks, look, I'm a capitalist. If you can make $1 billion, wonderful. Just pay your fair share, man. Not 8.2%. If you paid 25%, we'd have $500 billion more over the next 10 years.
Biden would raise the minimum tax on billion-dollar corporations to 21% from 15%, as well as limit tax deductions for executive compensation. But the $7.2 trillion budget is likely not getting through a Republican-controlled House. And with this new budget, the White House is updating its outlook on the economy with an optimistic picture of the jobs market, GDP growth, and declining inflation. New polls show Americans are feeling better, but as national correspondent Atral Nashar reports, they're reluctant to credit the White House.
When it comes to the economy, there's a disconnect between how it's doing on paper.
It's hard to fight it, and we don't really see anything getting in the way of the positive momentum.
And what polls tell us about how people feel.
We're still paying extremely high prices, sometimes 3 or 4 times what we used to pay.
Americans say their financial situations are improving, according to monthly nationwide surveys by the Financial Times and University of Michigan. But when it comes to meeting personal expenses, more say they're surviving than thriving. Views of the overall economy also improving, but still far more negative than positive. And that matters in this election cycle. 57% of surveyed voters say economic issues like jobs and the cost of living are the most important issues when deciding their pick for president.
It's President Biden's highest priority to relieve some of those burdens. But since the pandemic, the average American household is better off.
Some of the president's closest advisors acknowledging the pain that many Americans are going through. Tom Perez, former DNC chair, now senior advisor to the president, says, "We recognize we still have a heck of a lot of work to do." On the campaign trail, the president highlighting the work that's already been done.
I inherited an economy that was on the brink, Now our economy is the envy of the world.
An economy inherited from former President Trump, now recovered from the pandemic recession with the strongest job market in decades. But more voters say they trust Trump to handle the economy, which Trump allies are seizing on.
And we went from stable prices to record inflation.
But both Biden and Trump have work to do. 20% trust neither candidate. Another indication this election could be decided by voters who don't want to see a repeat of either administration, but may eventually pick a side. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Tomorrow, 4 states hold primaries with 161 delegates on the line right now. Donald Trump is just about 140 pledged delegates away from surpassing the number needed to become the presumptive Republican nominee. That would, of course, secure his head-to-head matchup with President Biden. In the latest Ipsos ABC poll out today following President Biden's State of the Union speech, when asked who would be better to lead the country, Donald Trump narrowly leading 36 to 33, but 30% said neither. Both Trump and Biden have rather glaring question marks surrounding their campaigns. Donald Trump continues to be weighed down by his legal troubles, while President Biden continues to answer questions about his age and memory. Those questions will be front and center again tomorrow as Special Counsel Robert Hur testifies before Congress about why he didn't recommend charges against the president. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins with more.
Special Counsel Robert Hur will testify before Congress Tuesday, his first chance to publicly address the decision to not recommend prosecuting President Biden for mishandling classified documents. Biden's age is expected to be a top topic. In the final report, Hur describing Biden's memory as significantly limited, fuzzy, and faulty, and said Biden couldn't remember when his son Beau died. A key reason he didn't charge Biden was because, Hur wrote, a jury might view Biden as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
They're going to expend,
Age concerns increasingly threatening Biden's re-election campaign. A recent New York Times Siena College poll shows the majority of Americans who voted for Biden in 2020 now say he's too old to be effective. Attempting to address these apprehensions, the president releasing a new ad.
Look, I'm not a young guy. That's no secret.
Biden's allies voicing strong support.
President Joe Biden had an incredible State of the Union address. He was strong. He was serious.
Meanwhile, a super PAC aligned with Donald Trump releasing this dark attack ad.
We can all see Joe Biden's weakness. If Biden wins, can he even survive till 2029?
The RNC posting a string of apparent gaffes by Biden, like one where he seems to refer to himself as the vice president instead of president.
The most diverse cabinet administration in American history led by a vice president.
Well, meanwhile, House Republicans are reportedly still waiting for the Justice Department to hand over all the documents and recordings they requested in connection to Robert Hur's investigation into the president. Some materials, though, were handed over last week.
And Kayla, what else do Republicans want at this point from the DOJ that they haven't gotten so far?
Well, Amir, Republicans want the raw material that caused Robert Hur to describe Joe Biden as an elderly man with poor memory. So they want to see the transcripts, or even better, they would like to get a hold of the audio recordings of Hur's interview with Biden. The DOJ did write a letter to the House Judiciary Chair, Jim Jordan, explaining these documents were being held back because they require review for classification and protection of national defense information.
Sounds like we'll hear it play out tomorrow. Live from Washington, D.C., Kayla Gaskins, thank you as always. Well, the sex trafficking victim whose story Senator Katie Britt shared during the GOP's State of the Union response is now calling out the senator, claiming she falsely characterized her experience and misled the public, all to make a political point. That woman's name is Carla Jacinto, and she recently spoke to CNN in an interview. Now, she says she was not trafficked in the U.S. by Mexican drug cartels, as was alleged by the senator. She says also it didn't happen during the Biden administration. It happened during the Bush administration, despite what Britt hinted while sharing the story. Here's a snippet of her response.
I hardly ever cooperate with politicians because it seems to me that they only want an image. They only want a photo, and that to me is not fair. And I think she should first take into account what really happens before telling a story of that magnitude.
Jacinto also disputed that she met Britt one-on-one, as Britt claimed, saying she actually met the senator at an event with several other officials. Britt's office told the Washington Post that her characterization of the story was not misleading. Philadelphia police are searching for at least 2 remaining suspects in a shooting that hurt 8 high school students last Wednesday. Surveillance video right here showing 3 masked gunmen getting out of a Hyundai right near a bus station and firing shots. Police say 2 suspects are in custody right now, and a gun along with 2 stolen cars have been recovered so far. Police urging anyone with information to call them. A 12-year-old in Massachusetts is in custody for threatening a mass shooting at their middle school. Police say the student, whose identity has not yet been released, made the threat in a group text on Friday, warning of the shooting happening today. The student was arrested yesterday after allegedly confessing in front of their family members. That's all according to police. No guns were found in the home. The Justice Department is conducting a criminal investigation into the Alaska Airlines door blowout. According to the Wall Street Journal, investigators have contacted some passengers, flight attendants, and the pilots on that January 5th flight. Alaska Airlines doesn't believe it is the target of the probe. And the head of the NAACP is encouraging black student athletes to choose public colleges and universities outside of the state of Florida. In a letter today, Derek Johnson criticized a new state policy banning those schools from using government funds on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has also said in the past on several occasions that DEI is toxic. A new rule that would have made it easier for millions of employees to form unions at large companies has been blocked by a federal judge in Texas. The rule by the National Labor Relations Board was set to go into effect today. It was going to change how companies are classified as joint employers. The judge said the rule goes against the law. The NLRB said it's reviewing the decision. Senator Bob Menendez, he and his wife pleading not guilty today to 12 new charges, including obstruction of justice. The 2 of them are now facing 18 indictments surrounding an alleged bribery scheme. One of the original co-defendants pled guilty 2 weeks ago, and his collaboration with prosecutors led to these new allegations. Menendez called the latest charges, quote, an abuse of power, and insists that he is innocent. The trial is scheduled to start in May. Coming up, the deadline Israel set for the start of an invasion of Rafah has arrived, but nothing has happened so far. What we know about Netanyahu's next moves. Then, 4 years after trying to ban TikTok in the U.S., former President Donald Trump seems to be changing his tune a little bit. Why? The GOP frontrunner says it may be a bad idea. Plus, several businesses are leaving an area in Maryland due to rising crime. What police are now doing to try and get a handle on the situation. Well, tonight, as the Muslim holy month of Ramadan kicks off and Gazans mourn thousands of civilians dead, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defending a plan to expand a military offensive into Gaza's southern city of Rafah, citing the need to eliminate Hamas and secure the release of hostages who've been there held captive by Hamas for over 150 days. Weeks ago, Israel imposed a start of Ramadan deadline of when it planned to start this offensive, should there be no temporary ceasefire deal in place. Talks ended last week without a breakthrough in that arena. So tonight, questions mounting over when and how Israel will carry out the delicate mission of evacuating 1.5 million civilians who are now crammed into the town seeking refuge from war hostilities. Many global leaders concerned about an even higher civilian casualty count when Israel launches its operation. Netanyahu has not provided specifics on a timeline, but tonight the U.S. says a major civilian evacuation will take at least 2 weeks to prepare for by IDF forces.
And we saw the government of Israel agree to open additional crossings. So yes, they need to do more. We've seen an improvement, but we think they need to continue to do more. And so that's what we're going to continue to push them to do.
And tonight, U.S. officials say some improvement seen over the weekend with Israel allowing more aid into Gaza. The enclave now on the brink of famine, with at least 25 reports of children and the elderly dying from starvation. It comes as we learn the U.S. ship with equipment to create a floating pier to distribute humanitarian aid in Gaza is en route to the Mediterranean Sea. The ship left Virginia on Saturday. Last week, while acknowledging the slow trickle of aid being allowed in by Israel, President Biden announced the U.S. would set up the temporary pier. Construction will take up to 2 months and require 1,000 troops who will remain reportedly offshore. Once complete, it will enable the delivery of 2 million meals daily. President Biden appears to be walking a fine line on the issue of how to best deal with Israel, with more people both in and out of the United States calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Actions by Biden in his role as president could be hurting him in his role as candidate. Christine Frizzau reports.
Israel's war with Hamas now in its 6th month, with 30,000 people now reported killed in Gaza. Many more on the brink of starvation.
Today we are facing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza.
Meanwhile, these are pictures from the latest strike in Rafah, a crucial battleground with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisting an invasion of the region is necessary in order to accomplish the mission of destroying Hamas.
We can't have 2/3 of a victory because Hamas will reconstitute itself with these 4 battalions in Rafah, reconquer the Gaza Strip, and do the October 7th massacre over and over and over again.
Prime Minister Netanyahu appearing on Fox News following recent statements by President Biden.
Would invasion of Rafah, which you have urged him not to do, would that be a red line?
It is a red line, but I'm never going to leave Israel.
Mixed messages from the president, who was caught on a hot mic saying this following last week's State of the Union address.
I told him, baby, show me this.
Netanyahu reiterating the limited power outside leaders have on his decisions.
Ultimately, I'm the Prime Minister of Israel. I'm responsible for the security and future of the Jewish state.
Still, President Biden has lost significant support from Arab Americans and young voters due to his seemingly unconditional support thus far. The pressure campaign to get him to restrain Israel carries on, with more than 100,000 voters choosing uncommitted in recent primary elections, plus protests popping up at political rallies and even at the Oscars.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Outside the barricades and inside the ceremony, many wore pins calling for a ceasefire. The implications of the bloody war now seeping into American life, from the streets to the red carpet to the campaign trail. I'm Christine Frizzau reporting.
Donald Trump now changing his tune on banning the popular video sharing app TikTok. In 2020, the former president tried and failed to remove TikTok from app stores in the U.S. over national security concerns. He then tried to get the owner, China-based ByteDance, to divest TikTok, but that never happened. Now he's not even sure about a ban at all.
frankly, there are a lot of people on TikTok that love it. There are a lot of young kids on TikTok who will go crazy without it. There are a lot of users. There's, a lot of good, and there's a lot of bad with TikTok.
He goes on to say the U.S. needs to make sure privacy and data is protected, but TikTok poses the same problems as other social media apps. Trump is accused of changing his tune because a hedge fund manager with a stake in TikTok donated to the Trump campaign. Trump denies this, saying he met with Jeff Yass but did not discuss TikTok. A majority of teens say taking a break from their phones makes them happy, but they're not setting them down quite yet. A new Pew Research poll surveyed nearly 1,500 pairs of parents and teens. 72% of teens said they often or sometimes feel peaceful without their smartphone. 44% said it made them anxious. 38% said they spend too much time on their phone in general. 27% said they spend too much time on social media. Still, nearly 2/3 of teens have not limited their use. Pope Francis's recent comments about the war in Ukraine are drawing more backlash from Ukraine and its allies. Francis said in an interview that Ukraine should surrender and have the courage to negotiate. Today, Kyiv's ambassador to the Vatican told NBC News he could not accept the Pope's reasoning. NATO's Secretary General added that, quote, surrender is not peace. Coming up, what happened after a boy was left alone at a Target store overnight? We'll tell you on the other side. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America. A Starbucks store in Silver Spring, Maryland is the latest among a handful of businesses to leave the area, all because of rising crime. A 62-year-old man was robbed and killed in a nearby parking garage 15 months ago, and no arrest has been made. The owner of McGinty's Public House, right next to the Starbucks, said her employees have been assaulted and harassed.
People are really concerned about the safety, especially after dark. There's too many gangs hanging around, being abusive, and there's not enough police presence down. A lot of people just say they don't want to come down here.
Police are now using drones and license plate readers to try and combat crime. The Starbucks employees will have an opportunity to transfer to nearby locations. Hundreds of Central Texas Hyundai owners got free software upgrades this weekend to deter thefts. The fix was meant to stop thieves in their tracks following viral social media posts showing people how to hotwire the cars with everyday items.
I've seen a little bit on it, but I know my mom was definitely worried about it, so she wanted me to come out, get it done, just for the safety.
More than 3.7 million Hyundais manufactured between 2011 and 2021 are eligible for the upgrade. The manufacturer is traveling the country bringing the upgrades to those who have not yet been able to make it to a dealership. A child found inside a Columbus, Ohio Target early this morning is being reunited with his parents. Police say an employee arrived to open the Target and found the 12-year-old boy locked inside the store with no adults around. It's not clear how long the child was there, and authorities transferred him to Franklin County Children's Services. In the morning, police confirmed his parents were notified after they'd filed a missing persons report the day before. They were scheduled to pick him up today, and no charges have been filed. Coming up, the big changes happening in the NFL today and when they'll become official. We will tell you about it right after this. Well, an exciting day for football lovers. Players are changing teams as the NFL's free agency legal tampering period began this afternoon. That means teams could officially start negotiating today with players who are not under contract. Nothing is official until 4 p.m. on Wednesday, but agreements reached during this period rarely ever fall apart. And we do know a flurry of moves have already been made. As some say, of course, the NFL is never truly in the off season. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Just check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Have a wonderful Monday.